Hi, everybody. I'm John Truby, and I want to welcome you to How to Write for Television. We have a huge sign up for this class today, which indicates how popular and important this subject is. It also shows just how international the International Screenwriters Association is. So, before we kick this off, I wondered if you could post in the comments section where you're joining us from on this call. I still get a big kick out of the fact that writers from all over the world can join together in a community and talk about this craft. So let's just see where everybody's from. All right. Arizona, Nigeria, Southern Florida. Hello from Hollywood. Albany, Poughkeepsie. I'm seeing UK. I'm seeing Asheville, North Carolina, Las Vegas, Georgia, Orlando, Florida, Vancouver, Canada. Yeah, it's pretty international. It's great. I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm extremely impressed by all the writers who are making a commitment to excellence by being here today. I love to see writers actively taking control of their career, and this is where it begins. Before I get going, let me say a huge thanks to my friends at ISA, to everyone interested in writing for television. I sincerely appreciate their vote of confidence in trusting me with their community. And I'm going to do my best to deliver everything we promised. So, what is my background? In my 30 years of helping writers create stories that sell at the professional level, I've developed a number of techniques to help you write films and TV shows, as well as best selling novels. And I'm going to share some of my favorite techniques for television with you today. Now, today's webinar is about becoming a player in the TV writing game, and it'll be in three parts. First, the problem we're solving for. Second, the solution, how to get into the writer's room and stay there. Third, near the end, I'm going to show you three techniques for winning the writer's room game that will make any showrunner love you from day one. So I hope you stick around for that content. There are three techniques I haven't shared previously in writing for TV, and they're techniques I wish I knew when I first started working in television. I learned them the hard way, and now you won't have to. Now, if you're here on this webinar, it means you're excited about your writing. But maybe you're also here because you've been experiencing some disappointment. Does this sound familiar to you? You don't even know where to start to break in. So, how do you overcome that? Well, let me give you some facts before we solve this mystery. The single best opportunity for professional success as a writer is in television. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that. First of all, it's essential for screenwriters to realize that TV is where the work is, not film. Hollywood makes 5 times more money in television than it does in film. And the difference between them is growing in leaps and bounds. That's because TV is where the eyeballs are. With networks, plus multiple cable and streaming services, companies are spending billions of dollars on content. Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Disney Plus, Max, etc. They all need a massive amount of product to fill worldwide demand, which means they're desperate for the writers who can create and produce the content to fill that demand. Now, obviously, not everybody can get a TV deal, but it's the most open market it's ever been. Reason 2, writers run the TV medium. So a good chunk of those billions of dollars goes to writers. In other words, TV is extremely lucrative. If you want to be a paid professional, TV is by far the best place to write. Now, do writers deserve to be paid a lot more for their work in television? You bet they do. That's why there's a writer's strike. Writers want a bigger piece of that massive streaming revenue. But whatever the result, and I believe writers will get most of what they're demanding, the fact is TV writers are paid far more than in any other medium. Reason 3, for the last 2 decades, the best writing in the world has been found on television, not film, which means that's where all the talent wants to be. And why is that so valuable to you? That talent shows off your work in the best light. Being a successful professional writer is all about credits. And those are the kinds of credits that will make your writing career. For maximum benefit, television is where you need to be. So, what's standing in the way? Let's first look at what seems to work, but is really a trap. Most writers think it's all about who you know. If I could only meet the right connection, I could break in. Big mistake. And this is a key point. When 99% of writers finally meet a connection who is powerful enough to help them, they don't have the skills to make those connections pay off. Understanding this fact will change your entire approach to your writing career. The overwhelming truth in Hollywood is that the connection doesn't create the work creates the connection. If you write a great script, real connections will find you so fast it'll make your head spin. But very few writers have that, even though they often think they do. So when a real opportunity comes along, they have no product to close the deal. Remember, you have one shot with a real agent or producer. If you blow that, their door is permanently closed to you. So, what's the biggest false solution for breaking into TV? Someone promises to help you write a good pilot so you can sell it and create your own show. That sounds really alluring, especially if your dream is to be the next Shonda Rhimes. Well, here's the reality of why the pilot strategy is such a bad idea. First, selling a pilot when you have no credits almost never happens. Do you think a multi-billion-dollar industry is going to buy your script, which is the basis of a multi-million-dollar show, when you haven't proven you know how to write for television? It doesn't matter how good your pilot is. These people in the studios are business people. They're not fools. They will only trust their money with writers who have a long track record of making them money. But you say, well, I've heard of examples where this happened. Sure you have, but it's extremely rare. And those few examples get publicized to regenerate the dream machine and keep writers baited on the hook. It's like prospecting for gold. One person strikes it rich while everyone else dies in the wilderness. But we only hear about the one who struck it rich. This is not the way sound business works. The pilot approach is a really bad strategy for succeeding as a writer, and that means big disappointment for you. But here's the real kicker. The reality of the pilot strategy is even worse. The reality about pilots is that even if you were the one person who actually sold their pilot, you would not get to write it. Let's say you wrote a brilliant pilot and it beat the astronomical odds and actually sold. Here's what would happen. They would hire a showrunner to write the actual pilot. TV is all about the showrunner. A showrunner is a highly experienced writer with major credits writing for television. There's a clear hierarchy on a writing staff. The highest level writer, a showrunner, also has a big producer credit. For a show to have a chance to beat the odds of getting past the pilot stage and get on the air, the producers have to hire a highly paid showrunner with writing credits who has proven they can run a show. These people are in great demand. Part of their deal as showrunner is they write the pilot. Fact, the showrunner is not going to use your script. They don't even want to read it. They want to write their own pilot because it's worth a lot of money. And they will insist on that or they won't take the job. Let me give you a recent example from personal experience. My wife, Leslie Lair, wrote a book that sold for a big option to television. Why? Because these were real producers. This is Selma Hayek's company, which has one of the longest track records on TV. They have deals with several networks and streaming companies. So they were able to make a deal with HBO. Now, naturally, Leslie was interested in writing the pilot, which she's written in the past. The producer said, "You'd probably write a great pilot, Leslie, because you created this material. But you will not be writing this pilot because if you do, we can't get a showrunner that HBO will accept." Now, let me be very clear. Writing a pilot has real value. It can be part of your portfolio to show off your writing ability and help you get hired on staff as a writer. Having said that, it's still far better to write a spec script of a show that's currently on the air. Why? Excuse me. Why is that? Because the job of a staff writer is to execute the characters and plot of someone else's story, not your own. And that's a very different and difficult skill. That's how you show your true ability to write for television. So if success doesn't come from false connections or writing a pilot so you can create your own show, how do you get in the game? Here's another key point. Writing for television and creating your own show is really about getting into the writer's room and knowing how to stay there. Learning how to write a pilot tells you nothing about how to write for TV once you get in. Knowing how to stay in the writer's room means giving the showrunner what they really need. That's the key to the whole game. So what is that? TV is the most challenging of all story forms to write. Writers must create great scripts under impossible deadlines. So they have to be masters of story. And TV includes all the major genres of writing, each of which tells the story in a different way. You have to be the master of those as well. I'm going to take you into the belly of this beast and show you what this animal is really like. Now, if you watched 30 Rock, you may think the writer's room is sitting around shooting the breeze, cracking jokes, eating junk food, and having a cool nickname. Well, here's the real inside joke about writing for television, and it's not funny at all. When you first get hired on staff, you quickly realize three things. One, I can write well. Two, I can write fast. But three, I cannot write well fast. Therefore, I'm screwed because in TV, you have to be able to do both at the same time. Few writers are trained to create at the speed required to write on a TV series. And why is that? The one thing you must understand in order to write for television is that TV is a plot eating machine. TV has a much bigger canvas than film. Writers have 6 to 22 episodes per season to work with. Result? It has a much greater complexity of character and plot. In fact, TV has the most complex plot of any story medium. And what does that mean for you? And believe me when I tell you, I speak from experience here. When you first get into the writer's room, you go into complete shock. Even indie novelists who are used to writing one novel per month are amazed when they see the season opening episode of a really good show and they think, well, that would be 2 novels in the indie world. And then there's another equally dense plot in episode 2, 1 week later, and so on. TV is the most shocking medium you will ever write for. Unless you know what's going to happen in the writer's room and the techniques for how to deal with it, you're dead. The point is not learning how to write one episode like the pilot. It's about knowing how to write multiple stories with long story arcs in a matter of weeks. That means being a master of story under high intensity pressure. Here's another key point. The most valued skill a TV writer can have is the ability to break the story fast and then be able to sequence it with a lot of other episodes to build a season. Without that skill, you're not going to cut it. So what's the big takeaway here? Be able to write well enough to get into the writer's room and be able to break story fast so you can stay there. Yes, it's hard. I'm not going to lie to you here, but you can do it. What you really need right now is the training that teaches you how to write a ton of plot fast and well. And that is what makes you a star in the writer's room. But you say, well, wait a minute. I've written a ton of screenplays. I know a thing or two about story. Flashing red light. Writing screenplays hasn't prepared you at all for this. Screenwriters typically take a minimum of 6 months to write a 100-page script, and that's fast. The average is well over a year. On a hit network show, writers often have to generate a top-quality 60-page script that's over half a screenplay in a matter of weeks. Why? Because a TV show is an express train. The showrunner has to fill the network order or they get fired. They don't have time for you to take 6 months to get the script right. That script has to be shot and edited and ready to go on the air. Now, what about those of you who have written novel series? Yes, you have to write fast there too. But that's prose. And it typically doesn't have anywhere near as much plot as you find in a hot TV show. That's because TV not only covers a lot of episodes over a season, each episode must have dramatic punch. That means each episode has compressed plot. Novel plot doesn't have that requirement. Now, here's the good news. This is your big opportunity, and you can do it if you know the techniques. Today, and in the course I'm going to tell you about, I'll show you how to grab that opportunity and take it all the way. Writing for TV and ultimately creating your own show requires you to know hundreds of techniques. Today, I want to focus on 3 of the most important. They are 1, the unique TV premise, which is the hook. 2, how genres in TV are different from genres in other mediums. And 3, breaking the story. I'm going to do a deep dive on 3 because so many other techniques depend on it. But you also need to know 1 and 2 in order to work on a writing staff and eventually get a shot at creating your own show. The first technique you need to know is that TV has a premise that's unique to its story medium. It's the first key to success in the writer's room, even before figuring out the show's characters and plot. Again, we have to begin with the central principle that TV is a plot eating machine. A TV premise is a story idea with enough plot to sustain multiple episodes. Now, obviously, you need to understand how the unique TV premise works if you want to create your own show. When you pitch a series, you have to show the executives that your idea has the potential to create enough plot for multiple episodes and seasons, because most cannot. Here's another key point. Premise is the single most important tool for selling the show to the studio and the audience. But again, first things first, you have to understand the unique TV premise in order to succeed in the writer's room. Why? Because all story ideas for individual episodes come out of the original idea of the show. The show's premise is the organizing principle on which all the characters and plot depend. So if you're going to be successful in the writer's room, you have to come up with episode ideas that perfectly express the original idea of the show. Let's look at a classic TV example. Michael Crichton was known for his great premise lines for movies and novels. In fact, for about 20 years, he was the best premise writer in Hollywood. That's an incredibly valuable talent to have, and it made him a fortune. Here's an example of his brilliance with premise lines. What if you put the two titans of evolution, dinosaurs and humans, in a ring and a heavyweight fight to the death? That's Jurassic Park, and it created an entire film franchise that sold $5 billion at the box office. That's the power of a great premise. Crichton is less known for coming up with one of the best premise ideas in TV history, ER. And what was the Crichton technique? Mixing genres that no one else has combined in the past. In the case of ER, that meant mixing doctor drama with action. Before ER, doctor drama had been slow and serious. Crichton realized if he combined it with action, he could have intense drama at 10 times the speed. And how do you combine doctor drama and action? By putting it in an emergency room. That's why ER ran for 14 seasons. This technique of mixing genres that don't normally go together is one of the things I talk about in the TV class. It's part of a larger discussion of a premise that's totally unique to television, which is a skill you must know to become a master of the writer's room. Now, TV is totally based on genres. The genre or type of story has more effect on the actual story beats of the script than any other element by far. One of the requirements for a show's success is it must stand out from hundreds of others in its genre. Therefore, your success in writing for television depends on how well you can write the genres of your show. Before you write any episode or create any show, you must know which genres the story idea uses. Here are the problems. 1, there are a lot of TV genres. 2, the most popular in TV are different than the most popular in film. And 3, The TV medium changes, sometimes radically, how every genre works. Now, in the TV course that I teach, we go through the plot beats of the most popular TV genres from which 99% of shows are made. And they are detective, police procedural, soap opera, historical drama, horror, fantasy, science fiction, action thriller, and crime. Let's look at some examples. Better Call Saul is crime. It's based, of course, on Breaking Bad, which is also crime. Andor is science fiction and action. The White Lotus is a unique combination of black comedy, crime, and soap opera. The Crown is actually high-level soap opera combined with epic. Succession is generally in the broad category of family drama, but it's best understood as part of the gangster genre, and specifically The Sopranos in Game of Thrones, which is Sopranos in the Middle Ages. Squid Game from South Korea has had over 150 million household views. It's crime plus science fiction plus game. Very unique combination there. Now, another problem with genres is that the most popular genres in TV are different than the most popular genres in film. The most popular in TV are detective and soap, known in some countries as telenovela. But detective and soap are among the least popular mediums in film. Another problem, the TV medium changes the genres, most importantly in the plot. Film is 2 hours. TV is multiple episodes over many seasons. That changes everything. Love story is the most extreme example of how TV changes the genre. In movies, the love story is about 90 minutes long, and it covers the courtship process. They fall in love, and at the end, they get married, either literally or emotionally. That won't work on a TV show with many episodes and seasons. So what do? They create multiple permutations of characters at various stages of development, from courtship to breakup, from marriage to divorce. It's called soap opera. This is why soaps can stay on the air forever. A Bridgerton is what happens to the love story when you design it from the beginning to extend over many seasons. How? Well, it starts with the foundation. Bridgerton is a combination of Pride and Prejudice and Gossip Girl. Pride and Prejudice is a novel and a movie. So even though there are 5 sisters, it focuses on one, Elizabeth. This way, it can track the story that ends with her getting together with Mr. Darcy. Bridgerton extends over many novels and many seasons. Therefore, it uses 4 sisters and 4 brothers. It juggles multiple love stories while placing one at the forefront with a different primary couple every season. This show will go on for at least 8 seasons, or as long as it takes to get each sibling married off. Now let's look at how another TV show handles a love story soap opera over many seasons. Downton Abbey is Pride and Prejudice combined with Upstairs, Downstairs from 1912 to 1925. Notice all 3 stories focus on the need for a woman to marry a wealthy, high-class man in a system that awards all of a man's wealth to the firstborn son or next male heir. In Downton, they make the absurdity of that system even more extreme by giving the Downton fortune to the third cousin. Then we see the three daughters struggle to marry over 6 seasons. Now, the best shows in the history of television all transcend their genre. For you to be successful, you have to know exactly how to do that for whatever genre your show happens to be. We spend a lot of time in the TV writing course going through all the beats for transcending the forms and writing a really great episode for that show. Now, a third crucial element to being a star in the writer's room is breaking the story. Because TV is a plot-eating machine, any experienced TV writer will tell you that breaking the story is 10 times harder than writing the script. Multiply that another 10 times for breaking the story over an entire season. That's what every showrunner is looking for when they hire you. So let me ask you, do you currently have that skill? Let me give you a scenario. It's your first day working in television. You're sitting in the writer's room waiting for the showrunner to arrive. Everyone's joking around, swapping stories. You're trying to learn everyone's name. You think, damn, I finally made it. I'm on the inside. I hope I don't screw it up. The showrunner arrives. Everyone snaps their attention to the job. In minutes, you're tracking 10 episodes at once. 3x5 cards are going up on the board. Here's the problem. Ideas are flying around the room, triggering new ideas, all at a mile a minute. You're trying to follow. They reference things that happened last season. You try to remember what they're talking about. Your goal? Lay low. Don't say anything stupid. At least that's what the conventional wisdom says you should do. Big mistake. You just flunked the first test. They didn't hire you to watch. They hired you to break story. Your goal should be dare to be stupid. Believe in the story knowledge that got you in the room. That's what the showrunner is looking for. Do you have the guts and the confidence to mix it up with some of the best story minds in the business? Here's the solution you give when you're a graduate from the Truby TV writing class. As they go around the room, you look for the big structural block that's keeping them from breaking the first story of this season. Using your training, you realize it's probably a particular reveal that everyone's missing. What's the opponent secretly doing to defeat the hero? You've done exercises on this vital technique, so you know how it works. Then you speak. You tell them where you think the main block is, and you give a suggestion. Even if they don't take the suggestion, and usually they don't, you'll impress them with your understanding of the deeper structural issue they have to solve. The whole conversation turns to solving what you alone spotted. That's a big win. The showrunner probably won't say anything, but she'll be impressed and glad she hired you. You stay focused on breaking story, but inside you're thinking, thank goodness I did the work. Now, ability to break story is also what the studio is looking for when they offer you a chance to create your own show. And that's why you as a writer need to become a plot-generating fiend. It's no good being able to do it just once, spending a year sitting in Starbucks writing your script. Or else when you get into the writer's room, you're going to be in big trouble. Now, one thing I say in the class when I talk about writers working on a show or creating their own show is whatever amount of plot you think you have to fill the season, you don't. Whatever amount you have right now, triple it, then triple it again. Nobody knows that until they get into the writer's room and find out just how dense these episodes are and how much plot they suck in. Now, to understand the skills you need to learn to be a plot generating fiend in the writer's room, we first have to understand why TV plot is so complex. One, as I said, TV has a much bigger canvas than film. Many episodes and sometimes seasons. You thought coming up with the plot for your movie was hard? That's child's play compared to TV. This poster, by the way, is from season 4 in Homeland, when Carrie goes to Texas. The second reason TV plot is so complex is serial story structure. What exactly are the plot requirements for serial television? Let me give you just a few. We have multiple heroes and multiple opponents with desires that extend and have to be tracked over many episodes and sometimes seasons. And all of them have to intersect and pay off at the right time. You also have a vast number of combinations of conflict, and not 2 or 3 reveals or even 7 to 10, as we have in film, but scores of reveals, with all these beats happening simultaneously. Back to the writer's room. Congratulations, you nailed your first day. Now you've got to expand the beachhead and demonstrate to the showrunner that the first day wasn't a fluke and you have serious story ability. Here's the scenario. The first week in a writer's room is typically about laying out the entire season. This is breaking story at a whole other level because this means figuring out the weave for serial story structure. And here's the problem. The walls are a patchwork of possible episode ideas and various main characters that have to be used. But you can't tell if these ideas for episodes are any good, or are they dead ends that will rob the room of valuable time. Plus, your knowledge of these characters and what stories the show has already done is limited and nowhere near what current staffers already know. Even if you have an idea for a show, how do you know if it'll fit the other episodes to build the season to a big climax? Sounds like you're screwed, right? Wrong. Because you've taken my television class, you're thinking at a deeper structural level than anyone else in the room. This next technique is not only for succeeding in television, it's a key technique for writing novel series. Individual episode ideas are not the beginning of the process, they're the end. The key to creating great story ideas and guaranteeing that they build over a season is focusing on the essential 4-point opposition of the show. Ask yourself these questions. 1, what's the most important 4-point opposition of this show? 2, which opposition between characters has the most juice on the show? 3, which opposition within the 4 points is the most underused? In other words, has the most potential for conflict and new plot that the show has not explored in the past? And 4, where does the showrunner want these 4 main characters to be at the end of this season? When you pitch to the room, don't start with episode ideas. Start with where you see the best potential for conflict going forward that will also get these characters to where they need to be at the end of the season. So, what's the showrunner doing during all of this? She's thanking the story gods for bringing her a writer who knows the tricks to structuring a season. Now, Game of Thrones is the ultimate example of serial storytelling. You have multiple oppositions that extend to about 150 characters. Plot doesn't get more complex than that. There are 7 kingdoms, 4 families, and they're all playing the Game of Thrones to the death. All major contestants, allies, and story threads come off of that setup. Imagine you're in the writer's room of Game of Thrones. I'm guessing it was probably the size of a football stadium, with all 4 walls covered with 3x5 cards to keep track of 150 characters and their storylines, all happening at the same time over 8 seasons. So let me ask you, if you were hired on the Game of Thrones writing staff, would you have known how to create and interconnect all those plot strands? I want to tell you how to get the training to do that right now. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten writer's room technique number 3. I'll circle back to that in just a moment. And knowing how to master all the elements of serial plot takes a tremendous amount of craft. And it's not just knowing how to execute these techniques individually. The way they interact is so complex. You need a system for how and when to implement the techniques. It takes 2 days to go through, which is what we do in my 15-module television class. Now, it helps me to know what's resonating with you. So let me ask you, of all the things we've covered today, what did you find most useful for being a valuable member of the writer's room? Please write that down in the comments. And while you do that, let me recap. So far, I've talked about what doesn't work when you're trying to break in. You know, breaking in is not about writing a pilot because it's not going to get bought and it's not going to get you your own show. You understand the game is really about being able to survive the writer's room. Now, we covered just a few of the many techniques you need to know to do that, including 1, the importance of the show's foundation premise and how the TV premise is unique. 2, how TV is based on genres and knowing how to write the genres your show is based on. The third and most important skill in television is breaking story, not just for one episode, but many episodes across an entire season and beyond. And being able to do this for the most complex plot in all of story. So let's see what you're writing in the comments section. Tammy says, speak up in the room, but know your technique first. Absolutely. That is the most important technique and thing that you have to be the master of to win in the writer's room. Melody also says, speak up when you get in. John, breaking the story. Emily, combining genres. Danny, also combining genres. We have another one, the importance of spec script. Yes. Obina, you need to be able to generate multiple plotted story that have multiple cliffhangers, then try and outline it sequentially. Absolutely right. This whole game is about being able to not just break one story, but sequencing stories so that they build in a season. That is the game in serial television. If you can master that, you will be one of the most sought after people in Hollywood. It's that important and that valuable. Now, in this webinar, I've touched on 1, the TV premise, and 2, TV genres. Obviously, you need to know a lot more skills to master those things. As for 3, breaking the story, I've barely scratched the surface of how to create plot over many episodes and seasons. You need to develop all the skills and techniques that are going to allow you to break stories on demand, even when you're tired and overworked, which in television is all the time. Please believe me when I tell you that. That's why I've created a class that explains all the professional techniques required to write successful television.
John, thank you for the class. We have a question from Sandy. She says, how do you feel about AI taking the place of writers?
I feel it's a great danger, but that right now it's overplayed. The sense that people have is that this is going to actually be able to write creative material. It's not. AI is simply going to regurgitate what has been put in there, which means that it's good for boilerplate work. It's good for generating ad content and so on and so forth. There is no way that AI now or any time in the near or, in my opinion, distant future will be able to do the creativity required to write at the level that will sell professionally. And why do I say that? Because what sells in every medium throughout the world is work that is unique to you. Something only you could have written, original. Yes, it has to be well structured, but it has to be something that only can be gotten from you. Otherwise, why are they going to pay the big bucks? They're not, right? They're not going to pay for generic writing because it's not going to sell. It's not going to be interesting to the audience. This is why I tell writers, don't fall for the lure of AI. If you do, it's a deal that you will make with the devil, and it will actually take you in the opposite direction of where you're trying to go. What takes you in the direction where you want to go? Learning the tools of great storytelling, regardless of medium. The tools of great storytelling that allow you to write something that no one else can do. If you do that and you maintain your focus and your discipline on that, you don't have to worry about anything else. Certainly not AI.
Randall is wondering, wouldn't it make sense that if a producer likes your pilot, that even though the showrunner will rewrite the pilot, there's a good chance you will be on the staff?
Well, first of all, no, there is not a good chance. And here's why. And I mentioned this earlier. Yes, it will show off a certain talent that you have in terms of originality. But what they're looking for is a very unique skill. And these are not the same. They're looking for, can you create great stories for characters that are not your own? A show idea that is not yours. Now, that's why I also said having a pilot is useful, but it does not substitute for having a great spec script of a show that's currently on the air, because that is the talent the showrunner is looking for first. Then the talent that they're looking for most, the one that keeps you in the room, is the ability to break stories fast, right? And so, but the first thing they're looking for is, can this person do a great example of characters on a show that is already on the air? This is why you want to do a spec script that is currently on the air, is currently very popular.
Denise says, I have an offer to write a pilot for a book series. This offer is from the author. How is this how it's done? I have no interest in being in a writer's room. Please advise.
It's done that way if you want to do it that way. An author is asking you to write a book series proposal. Is that, I don't see that. Who is the question from, Sam?
Denise.
Denise, I'm trying
It says, I have an offer to write a pilot for a book series.
Um, I personally, I don't know what the offer is. I don't know how much money is involved. Personally, I think that I would want to be spending all of my time writing a pilot for my own series or my own book series, for example. Um, we don't have a lot of time in this world, especially to create original material at a very high level. And so I believe it's important that we focus on creating, first of all, mastering the craft of story in whatever medium you're working in, but then also putting together a portfolio of material, high level material that you can show off as this is you, this is your brand, because this is what ultimately is going to sell. As I mentioned at the very beginning, talking about AI, the studios, the publishers, and so on, they're looking for something they can only get from you. Now, in TV, to get to that point where you create your own story brand, like a Shonda Rhimes, you have to prove you can write somebody else's brand first. But that's on television, and that's getting paid a lot of money, a lot more than probably you're going to be paid from a novelist to do what they're asking you to do. So, unless it's a lot of money, I personally would not do it. I would be focusing on my own material and getting that out there, because you're not, what are you going to do? You're going to show this off as part of your portfolio? No, you're not.
Kevin has a question. Should an intention be to implement 2 or even more subplots per episode, with intention of concluding them eventually over an episode or so?
It totally depends on the show you're writing for. That show will determine the structure that you use. Some shows have multiple subplots, some do not. For example, you might have a detective story that solves one crime over the course of the episode. There's no subplots there, right? That is what you figure out by looking at the show when you decide which show am I going to write a spec script for. If it is a show that always has a B and C story, for example, subplot lines, then by all means, you need to have them in yours as well. But again, the order that you do this is you look at the show that you like, that you feel you can write for, and that will show off your writing ability best. Study it carefully, look at it on the structural basis. This is something I've emphasized this entire webinar, which is what is going to set you apart from so many other writers that are trying to do what you're trying to do, and even those in the writer's room already, is a master of the structural elements of serial storytelling. And so that means you have to look at a show that you're thinking about writing for and breaking it down structurally, something that we do in the course very extensively, shows you how to break down structurally how that particular show and episode works. Once you know that, you then match it exactly.
Alita is wondering, do these same principles apply for animated shows? Is this the same for animated shows?
Absolutely the same. Absolutely the same. Again, what we're looking for here is to master the structure of that show. Now, obviously, there's vast levels of difference in terms of the level of the audience that any animated show would be focused towards. Some are very, very adult, very advanced. Others are not. And again, so what you're looking for is take that show at face value, take it exactly as it is, and break it down and realize exactly how it works. And then you match that. Again, it's all about showing a showrunner that you can do that form, because one of the biggest mistakes that a writer makes when they first show up in the writer's room is they write an episode that I decided I'd send him off on a road trip, right? No, we don't do that. Right? We have certain sets that we have. These are places, right? If it's a lawyer show, we are in a courtroom, right? We're not on a road trip. So they are looking for, can you match that structure and the settings of that show exactly?
Idea Media is wondering, does the show Once Upon a Time count as a fantasy drama and a soap opera?
Um, I have not seen that show, many episodes of that show at all, much less recently. I don't know. Um, my guess is, as I recall, it also had, besides fantasy, it also had elements of horror. But correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I'm just doing this from a very vague memory. But that is one of the things that is so important to do, is to know exactly what the genres are. And by the way, most shows, as well as film, as well as novels now, are multiple genre shows. So need to know all the genres that they're using, right? And that's why I mentioned, and it can be surprising. That's why I mentioned Succession. Yeah, it's a family drama, but it's a very unique kind of family drama that's much more focused and much more built on gangster. So it's family drama plus gangster. And if you don't know both of those and know that it's using both of those, you would have no clue as to how to write it correctly.
Vicky is wondering, if you have an idea for an episode in a writer's room, do you get to write it?
Usually you would, yes. Now, again, it depends totally on the showrunner. Showrunner is the boss. They are the dictator. And there have been many showrunners, and this is very controversial, but there have been showrunners that they will take all the story ideas and they write all the episodes, which I think personally think is wrong. It should not be done. But you have certain people who think, and they are a unique story brand. They're very powerful. And again, in television, writers run the medium. They are the king and queen. So they can do whatever they want. But usually, unless you have a showrunner like that demands to take all the credit and write all the shows and get all the money for each episode, then they usually will give you that episode to write. And then the question is, can you execute it properly? And that's why I mentioned in that third major technique for the writer's room of how you've got to win that first episode, because the first episode that you're given is make or break. That's what they're looking at. If you nail it, you're made. If you don't, you're in trouble.
C is wondering if you can go over the 4-point opposition and what it is again.
Sure. I go into this extensively in the course, and obviously we don't have the time for that now, but 4-point opposition is one of the most important techniques in television, if not the most important technique in television, because serial story structure is based on that. Now, I mentioned that there are all kinds of story elements that go into serial story structure, which, by the way, comes from novels, and specifically comes from Charles Dickens. That's why TV in the last 20 years has become the greatest story form in the world. It's because it's taking the techniques of great novel writing from no less than Charles Dickens and translated into the drama of television. That combination is super powerful. Now, this idea of the 4-point opposition is there are many different ways to do a 4-point opposition. But what in simplified terms, what it means is you have 4 major characters who are all in conflict with each other. In other words, this would be, for example, fundamentally different from, say, a detective show, a Sherlock Holmes, for example, where you have one major character who's driving everything, and then the opposition comes from a different opponent every week, the person who commits the murder. You're not going to get a 4-point opposition there, but that's not serial story structure either. So if you had something like an ER, you have multiple main heroes, main characters, but they are also, and they're all, quote, good guys, but they're also in conflict at various times with each other. This is how we generate, one of the ways we generate conflict and plot over multiple episodes and seasons. And that's why TV is, in many ways, especially serial story structure, is based on. But again, to really understand that technique, which, as I say, is probably the most important single technique. That's why I wanted to highlight it for you. And that second major technique in the writer's room is 4-point opposition. That's if you've got that, you're going to be ahead of almost everybody else structurally who is working today.
Zelda Divine Incorporated asks, is it a valuable use of time to write not only the pilot, but also the first season episodes and then submit the whole bundle?
You can do that. But again, my question is, what is your end? What is your goal? Now, will that be more effective in terms of giving somebody an idea of what this show would be like? Yes. But again, you're not going to sell that. And I'm not trying to be negative here at all. I'm trying to be real to show you how you get to that point, the point where you can sell a show. If you haven't written individual episodes for TV yet, just writing more episodes beyond the pilot doesn't make any difference, because all they're going to buy is, if they buy it, which is incredibly rare, all they're going to buy is the idea. And they're going to then give it to a showrunner. And they won't even necessarily hire you on staff. If you haven't written individual episodes for television, they probably won't even hire you on staff. So again, having a pilot with multiple episodes that you've written for your show, is that valuable? Absolutely. I don't want to give anybody the impression that this isn't a useful thing to do. I just want to keep it real in terms of, what is your strategy for success? Don't do that if you think if the more I write in terms of individual episodes of the season, the better chance I have to sell this and the better chance I have for my own show. It is not there. That's not what it will do. The most it will do is having that with 1 or 2 spec scripts that you've written of shows currently on the air that can show I can be on staff. I can be on staff. That's what you're trying to get to. That is the big gatekeeper right there. And once we then get on staff, and then we show that we can break story and we can be part of a successful TV season, preferably multiple seasons, then you have this great pilot and great idea for a show. And then they take you seriously. Until then, they will not take you seriously.
Sky is asking, how would you recommend writing a spec script for something where the seasons are completed before airing, like Netflix streaming shows?
That's the whether the show is currently live, essentially what you're saying, in other words, it's currently ongoing for the way a network show would be, is not the point. It just needs to be a show that is currently on the air. It's not, in other words, you're not going to write a Mad Men episode, right? So the whether it's a streaming where that season is currently available, say on Netflix, that's fine. What you're doing is showing, and everybody knows that who reads your spec script, they know that this is not going to be bought by the showrunner of that show for next season. No, do not think that is going to happen. That's not what that spec script is about. You will not sell it to that show. In fact, they will be the most critical of your spec script. What you're doing is and the real trick here is that you're using that as a calling card to other producers of shows in that genre. So, for example, if you were writing a spec script for a crime show, yes, by all means, send it to the showrunner of that particular show. But you also want to send it to showrunners for other crime shows because they know what everybody is doing, and so they're gonna read it, but they're going to be much less critical of it because the showrunner of the show you've written for, that's their baby. They're going to be nitpicky. Oh, you didn't do that right. You didn't do that right. Well, the other producers, the other showrunners aren't going to be that way. They're going to say, hey, this is a pretty good job. I like the way what they did with this. I like how they added some of their own creativity, but also showed they could write the show. They could create and express those characters. So that's the strategy behind the spec script.
Grassy Knoll is wondering, I have a banger spec script. I've written it in a week. Where do I send it to get it in the hands of people who will hire me?
Well, there you run into the problem of the agent. It is highly unlikely that you can send it directly to that show and have them read it because they have rules that they won't do that. You have to have somebody reputable send it in for you. Now, you say, well, I don't have an agent. Yes, that is in fact the biggest problem. Learning these techniques that we've been talking about and the techniques that are in this course is hard to do, but it's doable because you just have to do the work. You just have to apply it, and you have to practice, and you have to write as many spec scripts as you can until these techniques are part of who you are. But that gatekeeper of the agent is a very tough gatekeeper. Now, one of the reasons I love working with ISA is because they have a number of programs to try to help you bridge that gap for connecting up with producers and agents who can help you out and who can get you across that chasm. It's a tough place to get across. And, ISA will tell you that as well. But one of the things that you can do, and obviously you want to look at the Writers Guild, and they will have a list of agents who are open to submissions. There are a number of different things like that you can do. Another thing that you can do is find an entertainment attorney. They will often be able to get it to somebody at that show. Again, they are putting up these barriers because they don't want to read everything that's coming across the transom, right? Because 99% of it's not going to be good enough. So that's how they block out most of the stuff. So you have to find a way, either entertainment attorney or whatever, an agent or some other means to get it to that particular show. And other shows of that genre. Once it's across the transom, then you have a chance because they're going to read it. And if you've done your work, if you've done your due diligence of mastering these techniques and expressing them in that script, you've got a shot.
Francesca's wondering, is this course content available forever once purchased?
Sam, why don't you explain how that works?
Yes. I'm going to actually answer a few questions at once. So first, it is not available forever. It is available for 1 year from when you purchase. So when you purchase, you will see, you'll get an email back with your receipt that brings you straight to our members section. And in that section, you'll see a menu button for the TV course. When you click on that, you're going to see all 15 modules. You can honestly go to whatever module you would like, starting from the beginning of this, and you can go back as many times as you want. My personal recommendation is starting with module 1. But I constantly hear from people that are just so excited that they jump around a lot. But you get access to all those courses right away, and then there's basically an assignment with each course that for you to work on. I recommend watching the video, doing the assignment, going back to the video again before moving on to the next course. John, how do these techniques apply to procedural comedies?
Well, I'd be curious as to which ones you're talking about. There was one, I think it was on Netflix. Boy, I can't even remember who the actor is. He was an actor who was on Arrested Development, and they would do a detective, a different police procedural every week or every show, and would have a different cameo guest star on there. That is a comic police procedural. Now, here's the trick in terms of how you deal with combining genres. There are some genres that are known as technical genres and some are non-technical. What that simply means is technical genres are more precise, they're more detailed, they're more prescribed in terms of these are the beats that you have to hit and in what order. Detective is one of those. Comedy is not. Comedy is non-technical. So whenever you're combining genres, it is super important that you know what is the primary genre. It's not just a matter of mixing 2, 3, or 4 genres together, because if you just do that, you'll get story chaos. You'll get stories going all over the place because each genre takes your story in a different direction, takes your hero in a different direction. So it's very important to know not only what all the genres are in that particular show, but know what is the primary one. So in a detective comedy or police procedural comedy, the primary genre that determines the plot is going to be detective police procedural. And then you do those beats in a comical way.
John, there's a question from Melody that I'll actually answer. Her question is, when is final payment due and when will classes begin? As I said before, the classes are recorded already. They will begin the moment you pay. You'll get an email with it. In terms of final payment, we do not have a payment plan for this course. So you'll be paying the $597 up front and get the email for the entire course all right away. John Pat says, you mentioned the Queen's Gambit. What's your opinion of writing a limited series?
The techniques for writing limited series are exactly the same, with a couple of key differences, but almost exactly the same as writing for serial television. Because the only difference is and it's not a small difference, but it is a difference. The main difference is that a limited series goes for, again, we have multiple episodes, so we're going to have the same serial television story structure. Usually multiple heroes, multiple opponents, a huge number of reveals. You have desire lines that don't get taken care of in one episode, and so on and so forth. All of these things the same. The difference is that you don't have the problem that you have with a show that is going to extend over multiple seasons, where you have to figure out the final episode of season 1 that not only concludes and pays off the entire season 1, but you will have to set up the opening episode of the next season. This is where so many shows have problems when they go into that sophomore season. Why? Because structurally, what they're dealing with is what goes into a great final episode of a season is in many ways the opposite of what goes into setting up the first episode of the next season. And so when you're just doing a limited series, you don't have that problem. All you have to do is pay off that final episode for the season. Now, that's not easy to do, don't get me wrong. But that is the primary difference structurally in terms of what you're doing. So all the techniques in the course that we're talking about apply to limited series as well as multi-season shows.
Lark is wondering, what tips do you have for writing in someone else's voice for established characters?
Voice is one of the most misunderstood elements in story. Hugely misunderstood. There are a lot of things that go into voice. So, for example, you could have in a detective story, in a detective novel, for example, first person. That is, you are in the mind of that character and only in that mind. And so when you're hearing them think and when they speak, that's their voice, right? But it's very different depending on the genre. And that's why this course, almost everything I do, is so heavily dependent on genre, because this is a genre story world right now in every medium, not just TV, in film, and in novels. It's a genre world. 99+% of all stories are at least one genre, but typically a combination of 2, 3, or 4. And the genre determines mostly the voice. Now, do you as the author add to that? Of course you do, in terms of, from among other things, the style of prose, for example, in a novel. That has to do a lot with the voice. But in television and film, it's much less common that we don't really get into first person versus third person versus omniscient and so on. It's almost always omniscient. So the question is, when it comes to voice, how do you add your voice to that? Well, as I mentioned, the first requirement is you want to match the style, the voice, and the structure of the show you're writing a spec script for. It's not about you adding your own. Yeah, you want to show that you're creative. You want to show that you are that you are original. That you come up with a new plot for that particular show that uses all those characters. But you're not supposed to be inventing a new voice. So again, it's a huge question, and it's a great question, but it depends heavily on the genre that you're working in.
Ben is wondering, does 4-point opposition apply to episodic comedy as well as serial drama?
Absolutely. In fact, there is no better example of 4-point opposition than television comedy. You look at any of the great sitcoms, for example, Seinfeld or Golden Girls, or you just go on and on. It's all 4-point opposition. That is how they generate plot and laughs, not only in one episode, but over multiple episodes and multiple seasons. It's all 4-point opposition.
Lark is wondering, can you say more about TV story weave?
Well, TV story weave is the game. And why do I say that? It's because if serial story structure is based, among other things, on multiple heroes, multiple opponents, and multiple desire lines that extend over multiple episodes and seasons, then what does that mean? You have multiple story strands. And that's why the key element to success in serial story structure, whether it's in drama or comedy, is the weave. What does that mean? That means think of serial story structure as a tapestry with many threads and many colors. Each one of those threads is a strand. We've got the A story, the B story, the C story. The ER always had 5 story strands per episode over 42 minutes, 44 minutes. That's a weave. And so one of the things I talk about in the course is how do you weave the strands so they pay off with each other? In other words, we don't want to do the Love Boat where we just, there are 3 different storylines that have nothing to do with each other, do not interconnect at all, and in fact, were shot at totally separate times. No, we want story strands where they interconnect throughout. So it's not only how do you make each story strand work as a story, it's how do you make them interconnect and cross-cut in such a way that builds story momentum, not destroys it. Because that's the great problem with serial story structure, with multiple story strands. The more story strands you have, the more you risk destroying narrative drive. Narrative drive is the single most important set of plot techniques that go into popular storytelling. In other words, the drive to move the story, the narrative forward at a fast pace. In other words, as we say in a novel, a page turner. In every medium, that's what the money guys are looking at. That's what they want. Now, at the same time, they need a serial story structure with multiple strands in order to extend over multiple episodes and seasons, because otherwise you couldn't sustain plot that long. That's why TV is a plot-eating machine. That's why that is the central principle of understanding how to write for television, this plot-eating machine. And that plot-eating machine is based on serial story structure. So this is both a strength. It's what gives it that great plot that can build an entire season. And it's also the great flaw that you have to the great structural challenge that you have to know how to overcome. And most writers don't even know that it is a problem, much less know how to overcome
it. Susie has a pointed question. She says, a recent trend in first season shows is to end with a very huge world-shifting episode, basically changing the whole direction of the show. It seems like an attempt to force networks to pick up a second season, which sometimes does not pan out. Do you recommend this, or what are your thoughts?
Well, there's a few things involved in your question. One is that these, you say, recent trend have a huge world-shifting episode, changing the whole direction of the show. Seems like an attempt to force the networks to pick up a second season. Well, they didn't do that without the network knowing what they were doing. Right? It doesn't come as a sudden surprise where they say, oh my God, there's this big world-changing episode that takes the show in a different direction. What a surprise. Wow, now we're going to have to pick up the second season. No, it's just the opposite. That was part of the plan that network or streaming network, whatever, is part of that decision from day one. And why is it really there? It's not about do we pick up the second season or not. It's if we're going to have that second season, how do we do the reset? I was just talking about this a few minutes ago. This is the central problem that any show has in going to the second season. And I talk about in the course, I talk about the classic problem that Homeland had in going from that fantastic first season. And then they had to reset the whole thing. And they had a horrible time trying to do that. It took them about the first 5 episodes of season 2 to get the reset so that the rest of the season would work and build to a nice climax in the final episode. So this is inherent to television. It is the great challenge that the showrunner and all the writers on staff try to deal with in creating a second season. Because otherwise, most shows, this is why I was talking about the premise, that one of the things that tells you whether a premise is for television or film is, can this story idea, the basic idea on which the show is built, can it sustain for more than one season? Not just more than one episode, more than one season. And most cannot. It's actually amazing that a show can go for more than one season, because again, you are having very dense plot in each of those episodes. So you've got a very dense plot over an entire season. You have eaten up a massive amount of plot. Well, they're done. They're wrung out on that show, on those writers. So they have to come up with a big structural, and that's why your question is a very good question, is because you've put your finger on something that's crucial. They have to come up with a major structural shift that can allow them to reset the show and drive an entire second season. And of course, how they do that depends on those particular characters, the basic premise idea that the show was based on, and so on and so forth. But that is the great challenge. And again, that's, if you have that talent as a person who can break story, you are extremely valuable to them, because it's really hard to do.
John, we just have time for a few more questions. Here's one that's going to put you on the spot. Do you have an example of a TV legal drama that transcends the genre?
The Good Wife. Good Wife, while it was on, was the best written network show of its time. That is a transcendent legal drama. I'm trying to remember the David Kelly one that I would put in that category as well. But it is difficult to transcend that form. Some forms are more difficult to transcend than others. That's a difficult one because it's a very prescribed form. Cop shows are the same way. They're very prescribed. So you have to hit those beats. Otherwise, people who love legal dramas, I don't really like this because it's not really a legal drama. So you got to do that. But The Good Wife was a whole different level. The level of writing on that was just superb. And it's something I talk about, in fact, go in great detail in the course, is how go through a particular episode to show you how not only is it hitting the beats of legal drama, which is a major form, but also how it transcended that form. But that's one of the most important parts of the course, is I go for every one of those major genres, talk about in detail how an individual show transcends the form. So, and the way I talk about transcending genre is you're trying to give the audience, trying to let them have their cake and eat it too. They want the cake, which is they want the genre that they love, right? But they also want you to transcend it. They also want you to do it in a unique way that they've never seen before. And they go, wow, that's great. I didn't expect that at all. And part of that is involved in finding a deeper theme, the theme that is inherent in that particular genre. Every genre has a underlying theme that is supporting that entire story form. And if you are not digging into that theme, and this is one of the keys to writing a great spec script, is you can't really do much variation on the way the plot works, right? Because then you're not matching the show. But what you can do is explore the theme that is inherent in that show. And if you can do that, well, people take notice, because most writers don't do it.
John, if you're writing comedy and drama, should you stick with one and only submit that genre?
It depends. Well, the question is, you say you're writing comedy and drama, meaning if you're able to write comedy and drama, the question again is, well, first of all, you always want to write a story that in a genre that shows off your skills best. Now, you may be fantastic at drama and you may be fantastic at comedy, but most people are not fantastic at both. All right. So you got to be honest with yourself. You got to say, what is my strength here? What genre will show off my strengths and hide my weaknesses? And every writer I know, some of the best writers in the world, have weaknesses. Nothing wrong with that. But you got to be honest about it. So, what is the genre that shows off your strengths and skills the best? Then you find a show that will show off your strengths the best, right? One of the reasons that you pick a popular show and a highly rated show is because it's like playing somebody who's better than you are in tennis. It's going to raise your skill level. It's going to show you off better. Why? Because what's inherent in how that show was structured from the very beginning, they did it right. And so when you write an episode in that particular show, you're standing on the shoulders of the thinking that went into making that great show in the first place. So this is the sequence you want to work through. Determine your strengths, what is the genre that's going to show that off the best, and then find a show and write an episode that will also show off your strengths. This is, again, we typically get one shot. We gotta come in with power, right? Don't blow that. Don't blow that. So come in with the best stuff you have.
John, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for everything and staying to answer so many questions. If anyone has questions that weren't answered and they would still like to ask them, please email me. My name is Sam. My email address is trubystudio@truby.com. That's trubystudio@truby.com. John, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, ISA. I have just absolutely loved talking about television with all of these great writers. And I hope that you will seriously consider taking your skills to the next level and getting into that promised land of writing for television. And of course, we all hope that this writer's strike is over soon. And if it's not over soon, that it is over with and the writers get what they deserve. So I think we all agree on that one. So with that said, I'll see you all the next time.